in contact with you, you are not on social media.
That's correct. Yes.
You are true to your ideology. That's great.
And the reason for that is just I wouldn't be able to control myself. I mean, that really would be my drug. People are my drug. Intimacy is my drug. And I wouldn't be able to manage it. And so it was just easier for me to not do it at all rather than try to moderate it.
Well, the book, as you mentioned before, and as I can attest to, is it has a certain intimacy. People get to know you through the book. So definitely check out the book. If you have questions about the book, et cetera, you're welcome to send them my way. I will buffer you from all those questions. I'll filter them. And Dr. Lembke, I should be formal. Forgive me. I've been referring to you as Anna the whole way through because we're colleagues. But thank you so much for sharing this information. And I know I learned a ton, and I know everyone else is going to learn a lot more about addiction and the good side of dopamine.
That's right. Thank you for having me. It's been really, really great to talk with you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for my discussion with Dr. Anna Lembke. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please be sure to check out her new book, Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. You can pre-order it on Amazon or any places where books are sold. It's an absolutely fascinating and engaging read, all about addiction and dopamine. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please follow us on YouTube by subscribing to the Huberman Lab channel. In addition, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify. And on Apple, you have the opportunity to leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have comments or suggestions for topics for future podcasts, please put those in the comments section below this episode on YouTube. In addition, we have a Patreon. That's patreon.com/Andrew Huberman. And there you can support us at any level that you like. Please also check out our sponsors that we mentioned at the beginning of the episode. That's a terrific way to support our podcast and our ability to continue to bring you zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools. And last but not least, thank you for your interest.
They know that as much as we say it's best to delay, teens are going to. That's harm reduction. Let's at least reduce risk of STIs, pregnancy, and so on.
And what do the data say is the consequence of harm reduction versus the kind of like thick black line, don't go anywhere near this behavior?
All the research, or pretty much all the research that I've read and hopefully will contribute to, shows that those messages, the harm reduction messages, or what I would say comprehensive. It really, the harm reduction, unfortunately, harm reduction has gotten a bad rap, partly because of cigarettes versus e-cigarettes and this reduction or harm continuum with tobacco. So maybe we don't say harm reduction, we say comprehensive conversations, comprehensive education from no use all the way up to what do we do if you are using. And all the research is really saying that those messages are way more effective than not using at all, or than that. If we tell teens don't use, and we see this a lot in sexual behavior, we say, do not have sex, period. Sign a contract that you're not going to have sex. And then they're in a situation, and we don't arm them with the understanding of how to negotiate, how to have a healthy relationship, how to have a conversation. What do they do if they're thinking that they might want to have sex? What do they do in that situation? We then find that we're having teens who then don't know how to protect themselves and either have sex that was unwanted or sex that was unprotected. And teens want to understand. They want the truth. They want the knowledge. I went to a school and asked whether if I came and talked about cannabis, would they come? And they said, absolutely. I want to understand it. And there's this great quote that I recently learned that said, if you don't, basically the concept is if you don't teach teens, they're going to seek out information. So the quote is, having teens learn about sex from porn is like having them learn physics from the Transformers, or having them learn how to drive from Fast and Furious. We need to give teens the information because they're going to find it.
That's right. They're being exposed to other information elsewhere anyway. So what you're talking about here is coming up with counterbalances.
Counterbalances, real science-based information that's not overblowing the risks, that's not scaring them, and then that helps them understand it's best to say no, but if you do, fentanyl, let's make sure you're not using alone. I mean, obviously, I don't want somebody using a drug that hasn't been tested and they got off the internet, period, because I know kids who have died.
It's so scary. We have close friends that gosh, I would have never guessed that their kids were using drugs. And maybe they were using drugs at the frequency that was always typical of youth. I don't know. I don't know the situations well enough. But, I would say about once every 4 to 8 months, I hear about someone's kid or close relative that died of a fentanyl overdose.
Yeah.
And it does seem to be kids maybe 30 and younger.
Yeah, it was more in the 20s and 30s. It's now really getting into the teens and young adults. You're absolutely right. And some of the teens I know of and young adults who have died were not your drug users. We talked about not stigmatizing. And that's the other thing. If we don't talk, then we're stigmatizing. We need to have those conversations. But a lot of those teens were not using. They needed a pill because they were in pain or they needed something. And they were not told, and this is again that harm reduction and that conversation, they were not told, don't buy something off of the internet. If you do, test it. And test it with a fentanyl strip, for example, and make sure that you're not using alone, because if you're using alone, we can't then give you Narcan. We can't do something. I carry Narcan with me all the time.
Do you really?
I do. I have it in my backpack all the time.
For anyone that you might see that's having an overdose, or
anyone who might see.
Kids in particular?
Yeah. Thankfully, it hasn't happened. But if it does, I would. And you can't hurt somebody from using it if that's not what's happening. So
should everyone carry a Narcan?
I think
pen?
Everybody should have Narcan. I do.
Wow.
I think every school should have Narcan. I think every library should have Narcan. I think every bar should have Narcan. I absolutely believe it. Now, test strips is an interesting debate that I've had. So I totally believe in this concept of comprehensive, if you don't want to say harm reduction, comprehensive drug education, comprehensive sex education. And what I mean by that is both the spectrum of use or behavior, as well as all kinds of drug, sex, rock and roll, that we talk about the whole thing. But fentanyl test strips has been an interesting dilemma within myself, and I'll explain why. I've been working with some groups to try to test whether we could study whether if we put both Narcan and fentanyl test strips in schools, would teens get them? So my fantasy, bowl of condoms, bowl of Narcan, bowl of fentanyl test strips, and you have it out for teens.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It is a very bold statement.
What about the argument that I imagine some people counter with? I'm not necessarily saying this is my argument, but just imagining that some people will hear that and say, having those things visible, freely available, will create more of an incentive for risk taking.
So I've grappled with that. And with condoms, we know that that's not the case. It's not going to create teens starting to have sex. Just going back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, you're not going to incentivize or create people engaging in any risk behavior by having the conversation. But my grappling with the Narcan and with the fentanyl test strips has been there. Oh, well, you tell me it's a bad idea to use a drug, but I'll just test it and make sure it's okay. Well, I have a couple of problems with that. Even though I still believe in it, I still believe in having those there because right now we have an overdose epidemic with fentanyl and other drugs. So I'll be honest with you, I grapple. If I were in a school and I saw a teenager taking a fentanyl test strip, which probably means that they're going to use it for themselves, is the first thing I want to do shake the kid and say, are you crazy? Don't. That means that you're thinking about using drugs. Of course, that's my inclination as a parent, as a scientist, as a developmental psychologist, as a human being. You want to say, what are you doing? So yes, I would grapple. But at the same time, if I know that there's a chance that a teen's going to go to a party or pick up a drug and not know, would I rather that they're safe? Yes. The problem with fentanyl test strips, though, is that they're not perfect. If you are testing the right side of the pill, but it's the left side that has fentanyl, you still could die. And so I don't want to give the impression that there's one stop is going to fix anything right now. It is not. And that is the issue with the comprehensive drug education or harm reduction conversations. I'm not saying that it's perfect. I'm not saying that it's going to stop young people from engaging or young people from getting hurt or unfortunately dying. But if you have a group of youth who are going to use, I would still rather arm them with that information so they don't find themselves in trouble. That is the biggest part that scares me.
Is fentanyl making its way into all pharmaceuticals, so like benzos, MDMA? I'm thinking about some of the things that are taken recreationally, benzos, MDMA. Is it in cannabis?
So most of what I've seen is either by itself, fentanyl using, or that it's mixed into pain pills a lot.
Why would kids want to take pain pills? I mean,
they're in pain, they're stressed.
I see.
So
they're doing it sort of self-directed, clinical.
Correct. Or Prozac, they're anxious.
I see. So it's not like they're doing it for recreational drug use at parties.
Some are, some aren't.
Okay.
I mean, there's been so many different circumstances. Cannabis and vaping have been interesting debates, and we actually had this just the other day. Some of the studies suggest suggest that biologically we can't necessarily combine cannabis or nicotine and fentanyl and have the same reaction on the body, and some suggesting that the studies haven't been there. And it's still so new, but I will tell you that that talking to teens and some studies suggesting that yes, teens are combining or at least getting, and a lot of times it's not knowingly. It's cut. The fentanyl is cutting, or the drug manufacturers and sellers are cutting a drug with fentanyl, and so they're not even teens are knowing it. But that some I was talking to a person the other day who said that he has definitely heard of and seen some teens with fentanyl overdoses from cannabis or from vaping. So there's so much studies that are still needed right now, and to understand the biological mechanism, as well as the access to these drugs that we don't know. But I'm nervous. So we teach about drug testing. We teach about not getting something off. There used to be a Skittle drug parties. You'd go and people would take drugs and all different things and put them in the middle of a bowl in the middle of the room, and just you take whatever.
Whoa.
Oh yeah.
When was that?
No, this is not long ago. Maybe 5-10 years ago. I was hearing about these Skittle
I never went
parties.
to a party like that.
I didn't either, but I didn't go to many parties. I was a pretty square kid. But
it's interesting. Maybe it was just, or it was. I mean, there were certainly drugs around, but I feel like now recreational pharmacology, it sounds like it's everywhere. And so different.
And self-medication is everywhere.
Yeah, that wasn't common.
That wasn't as common. But
or if it was, people weren't talking about it.
I think it was. I mean, I remember as a middle school student walking into the bathroom and somebody had taken, I think it was called a lewd then, and had passed out. It was certainly around different drugs, but not the same that we're seeing now. And we definitely saw cocaine overdoses when I was younger.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of weed, cannabis, that is, alcohol, psilocybin then as a recreational drug. Now obviously it's being explored as a clinical tool,
yes.
as is cannabis for that matter. But hard drugs like cocaine, amphetamine, PCP were discussed in the media a lot, and it certainly existed in some high schools and colleges and things like that. But it sounds like it's seeping out of everywhere.
It is.
And it's in these commercial products. I mean, I think the picture that has been created here is kind of an ominous one. So how optimistic are you?
I will tell you I'm optimistic in seeing a change in the landscape of education. Now, some people say education doesn't work, that we need policies. We need both. I mean, we have federal policies and regulations that are slipping through the cracks. FDA with regulation of e-cigarettes, with cannabis, legalization but not being enforced. We have age restrictions not being enforced. So we certainly need education. And I'm seeing more and more people, for example, the concept of harm reduction or comprehensive education, comprehensive sex ed. Not everybody is, of course, up for it or open to it, but I'm seeing more of a shift towards understanding the need. I'm definitely seeing more teens, as we were talking about earlier, more teens being willing to say, no, that's not something I'm going to do. More teens joining youth groups, more teens speaking out about concerns and trying to be healthier and make healthier decisions for themselves. So I'm optimistic in the human capital and the social capital. I'm not optimistic when it comes to the pharmacology or the drug capital, so to speak. More and more drugs infiltrating our youth. I mean, you could vape ... anything nowadays, and that makes me very nervous. I do think vaping, and I am using vaping instead of e-cigarettes there to be more lay conversations there, or what the culture is saying. Vaping is just more normalized than we've ever had it, just like smoking was normalized. Vaping, and now vaping anything, is very scary to me and very much normalized. So that worries me. Again, the fentanyl, the hallucinogens, making its way more and more. So the drugs themselves and the new devices scares me. The social and the human capital gives me optimism.
Very grateful to hear that you have optimism. Sounds to me, and correct me where I'm wrong, please, and add anything, that for parents, for siblings, for teachers, for educators, or for any concerned citizen, it seems like having conversations about these things, the fact that they're happening, so not turning a blind eye, the fact that, kids are aware of it, that we're fooling ourselves if we think that they aren't aware of these risk-taking behaviors. They're all around them anyway, so we shouldn't shy away from those conversations. And that at least having a conversation about the difference between avoiding behaviors and harm reduction is something that one ought to consider. I mean, obviously, this is a household-by-household choice.
Absolutely.
In some cases, school-by-school or classroom-by-classroom choice, but certainly household, maybe even parent-by-parent choice. But that because of social media and just because of the nature of youth, that young people are having these conversations anyway. That's what I'm hearing coming through, and that you said don't formalize the conversation so much that, Saturday at 3:00 we're going to have a discussion about drugs, but make it part of the landscape to create some ease.
Absolutely.
Make it facile to talk about these things, concerns, and probably listen to them too. They're right there in the midst of it. So they have a data set internally about what's actually happening.
Totally agree. And I often say to parents or educators, if they're listening to this podcast or anything, it's actually say, hey, I learned something. Can we have a conversation about what I learned? And not confront. Again, it's a conversation, not a confrontation. It's let's normalize drug discussions. Let's normalize behavior discussions, not normalize the use or the behavior itself. So talk to your teens. You're absolutely right. Talk to your teens. This is what I just learned. What do you know? Can we find out some information together? Go on our Reach Lab websites, go on other websites, go learn information out there, learn together, and not lecture, but have a conversation. You may not know right away. A teen may not tell you right away, yes, I'm using, or yes, I'm having sex, or yes, I'm drinking alcohol, or yes, I'm doing something that is just a risky behavior. But that's not necessarily our goal as adults, to find out today whether or not somebody is doing something. It's okay to let it be a little bit more organic. It's okay to start that conversation and see that you're building trust. It is parent to parent, but I would say I'm not going to bust you. Certainly I'm not going to be happy, but let's have a conversation so that way we can build the trust, and I can help you either not use, get help, stop using, or be safer in using, or help you prevent from using at all. So having that conversation, that organic, and talking to teens where they're at. As a developmentalist, that's what we do. Meet people where they're at, meet youth where they're at, whether that's using already, not using. Don't come at them with your preconceived notions as an adult, because it will not work. It will backfire. We need to use the strengths. Young people are strong. Young people are smart. We need to use their strengths, take their lead, and then use our adult wisdom and experiences to then turn that into the proper conversation.
Love it. Well, on the topic of conversation and communication, one of the kind of unique features of this podcast is that we have a large social media footprint, and inside of that footprint, we not only broadcast information, but we get information back. So in anticipation of this conversation today, I reached out to followers of Huberman Lab social media on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram, and they had a lot of questions for you. We don't have time to go into the many thousands of questions, but I'm going to just ask you, if I may, in kind of a short Q&A format, a few of them. And if you don't have answers, you can just say pass. We'll get back to that. Maybe we'll do another episode another time. Please don't feel obligated to give thorough answers. This is, we just wouldn't have time. Yeah, so one of the top questions is, would love to learn more about how to get teens to see the longer-term implications of the choices they make and the habits they form now. Is there any way to get them to understand how now leads to later?
We've done studies where we've asked teens about their goals. And I want to be a dancer. We had one teen tell us, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be whatever it is. Asking teens about their goals, about their aspirations, and then connecting their current behavior and their current risks and keeping themselves healthy and how that plays into their goals. That tends to work a lot, and we've seen that in our studies. Teens set boundaries. I don't want to get pregnant because I want to be a dancer, things like that. So really linking what they're doing now to their ultimate goals is one way to really help them think that through.
Mm-hmm. I like that, how a different, maybe even larger goal maybe could supersede these like short-term behaviors. They could see how those things link up.
Absolutely.
That's great. There's another question that came in requesting some positive news about teenagers to be shared. Quote, every discussion is around risk or emotional distress or social anxiety or phone addiction, as if they're all dysfunctional because of their brains. We never dismiss toddlers learning to talk and walk because their brains are offline. So I think the point is that, can we highlight some of the ways in which the adolescent/teen brain is exceptional at something that perhaps the rest of the brains out there are not?
So I mentioned some of them around our youth group and about the youth movement now against drugs and other things. I think, and it comes to the optimism, I'm the biggest teen advocate out there. It's why I study adolescents and I do the prevention and advocacy work that I do. Teenagers are fundamentally fantastic. They're creative. They're passionate. Teens care about the environment. Teens really care about social justice. Teens do care about our future and our planet. That is wonderful, well more than do adults right now. So I think we should be capitalizing on that. Teens are incredibly creative. We need to be working with teens and young adults in everything that we do because they are our future. And I don't mean that as a cliche. I really mean that. So having the conversation, let them be part of that conversation, help them find out what they think we should do to solve some of the problems. They're the ones to talk to. So I am very optimistic about teenagers. We have 40 teenagers and young adults who work with us all the time on our work because we trust them. So I think some people are afraid of teens. I embrace them. I think they're fantastic.
Love it. Do we know how vaping shapes the teen brain? In other words, are there any known biological changes in the developing brain as a consequence of vaping? And here I'm going to assume it's vaping nicotine, but we talked about cannabis as it relates to psychosis earlier, so let's just keep it restricted to nicotine.
Sure. Well, we know that during the adolescence that nicotine changes the brain wiring. And what do I mean by that? We're actually born with the nicotinic receptors. We're born with the ability to become addicted to nicotine. Same thing with the cannabis you were talking about before. So if we don't, during the adolescent time when we're pruning away and getting rid of the connections, the neurons that we don't need, what happens is during that process, anything that we don't use, that we don't reinforce goes away. Well, if we introduce nicotine into our brain, it solidifies, it keeps that receptor there and also makes it to where our receptor is really kind of, I think of it as like keys and locks in a key, and suddenly you've got that receptor and it says, ooh, you're putting nicotine in there, keep that in there. Or cups, it's developing those cups I often think about, and filling those cups with nicotine, and those cups are your receptors that were already there. You then take away that nicotine and your cups say, I need more. So you're rewiring your brain, you're wiring your brain to be more likely to become addicted, and now you're addicted and you need to keep feeding those cups with nicotine or you're going to go through withdrawal. And so that is what is happening during an adolescent and young adult that we don't see in adults. That's why we really want to keep young people away from nicotine as long as possible.
A lot of questions about are there negative effects of pornography on the developing brain? I imagine there's a lot of literature on that.
Yeah, I don't know as much actually in the developing brain. I'm sure there is. I don't know it. There is, but there's clear evidence about viewing pornography around just not having good, healthy sexual relationships, because porn is not normal. It is not a normal relationship between two people. What you are doing is really making it so that way you're not necessarily developing a healthy relationship with your partner because you're assuming some gold standard out there that may or may not be able to be achieved. So, and it also is a problem with body shaming and the body types that most people don't have and can't achieve, and that's another problem out there with pornography.
A lot of questions about how social media impacts brain development. That's probably an entire episode unto itself.
It is that we could do another time.
And we should. And if you'd be so gracious to come back and do that, we will. I think as just a final question, is there any information about potential causality between the mental health crisis that we observe in youth and let's just say substance use? Of the sorts that we talked about today. Obviously, the directionality is tricky there. You can imagine that a lot of cannabis use is leading to more psychosis, but it seems more likely that kids are self-medicating.
Correct.
In the face of like immense challenge, not just the lockdowns and the culture around isolating kids from other kids and the stress that was on everybody, stress generally, the socio-political landscape, social media. I mean, it's hard to not feel like it's at least a cloudier, maybe a darker time than it used to be, but I don't know. I mean, we humans have evolved through a lot. And I don't know that it's also fair to say that everyone's, bummed out about what they see. Presumably there's still some optimists out there.
So absolutely. There are plenty of studies that show the bidirectional relationship between anxiety, depression, mental health, and substance use. You're right. A lot of teens are self-medicating by using various substances to reduce their anxiety, reduce their stress, and also just social lubrication, right, of going into a party and pre-gaming or going into a party and using drugs to make themselves less stiff, less stressed during that situation. But more what we're talking about is that they're self-medicating because they're feeling sad or uncomfortable, and this is, they think, helping them. Again, it's not helping, it's making them feel less bad by continuing to use. But we also do know that drugs also lead to suicidal ideations, suicide attempts, psychosis, and other mental health issues. We also know that drugs lead to reduced academic achievement, even though there's some potential cognitive reinforcement that's going on, there's also some issues with lack of concentration. The other piece, by the way, that we didn't really talk about a lot, but is the co-use, that we're seeing a lot of teens not just using multiple products, but using them together. So a lot of teens who are chasing cannabis and tobacco because it enhances the high, or they're using cannabis with alcohol and other mixing of drugs, which is enhancing the high, but not in a good way and very scary for young people. And a lot of times young people don't even realize, like with blunts, which is truly, as I was saying before, using nicotine and cannabis together, that you're actually becoming addicted to both products really simultaneously. And that we're seeing young people who are having mental health issues and depression more likely to use both products. So definitely linkages there amongst mental health issues and multiple products as well.
So polypharmacology.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to end on a down note, but I don't think it's a down note. I think what you done today in sharing with us the realistic landscape of what's happening out there and the realistic landscape of what you're trying to do to ameliorate these issues is nothing short of spectacular. Meaning, as cloudy as it may seem in our youth, there's also great hope in everything that you're conveying, which is, to put it simply, why would you be trying so hard to fix these problems if you didn't believe that they could be fixed? So I find great optimism in the message. I like data, and you've shared with us a tremendous amount of data about what's happening, what likely needs to change, and the optimal change and optimal route to change, as well as some, realistic, perhaps less than optimal, but realistic approaches. Like sometimes it's just a matter of harm reduction. We're not going to eliminate these potentially dangerous behaviors or dangerous behaviors. So for all of that, I want to say thank you. It's a tremendous gift to us all. And I know that we have a lot of parents and kids and non-parents and every age and background that listen to this podcast. And what's clear to me is that it's going to be a community effort to try and face all this. And I keep hearing in the back of my mind this thing that you've said several times now, that kids know what's happening. We have to have these conversations. They're hard conversations to have for any of us. They're uncomfortable for adults to have. But that until we normalize at least the conversation, it's unlikely that we're going to solve these problems. So thank you for your incredible efforts in the research domain and also for helping to normalize and bring about these conversations. They're so important. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Bonnie Halpern-Felsher. Please be sure to check out the links in our show note captions to Dr. Halpern-Felsher's laboratory, an opportunity to contribute to the research in her laboratory, and the zero-cost resources that she has provided for adolescent, teen, and young adult health. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on both Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. Please check out the sponsors mentioned at the beginning and throughout today's episode. That's the best way to support this podcast. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast or topics or guests that you'd like me to consider for the Huberman Lab podcast, please put those in the comment section on YouTube. I do read all the comments. Not so much on today's episode, but on many previous episodes of the Huberman Lab podcast, we discussed supplements. While supplements aren't necessary for everybody, many people derive tremendous benefit from them for things like improving sleep, for hormone support, and for focus. To learn more about the supplements discussed on the Huberman Lab podcast, you can go to Live Momentous, spelled O-U-S, so that's livemomentous.com/Huberman. If you're not already following me on social media, I'm Huberman Lab on all social media channels. So that's Instagram, X, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Threads. And on all of those platforms, I discuss science and science-related tools, some of which overlaps with the content of the Huberman Lab podcast, but much of which is distinct from the content on the Huberman Lab podcast. Again, that's Huberman Lab on all social media channels. If you haven't already subscribed to our Neural Network newsletter, our Neural Network newsletter is a zero-cost monthly newsletter that includes podcast summaries, as well as brief protocols in the form of 1 to 3 page PDFs, covering everything from deliberate cold exposure to a foundational fitness protocol, optimizing and managing your dopamine, neuroplasticity and learning, all of which is completely zero cost. And to sign up, you simply go to hubermanlab.com, go to the menu tab, scroll down to newsletter, and supply your email. We do not share your email with anybody. Thank you once again for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Bonnie Halpern-Felsher. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for your interest in science.